Hi, this is Jerry Edmon. I want to discuss a very painful season of our life, yet it's one of those that's just very necessary, and that's the season of grief. Grief. You know, if you're going through this right now, obviously you've lost something or someone very special to you, and I'm very sorry for that. I have some thoughts and instructions that I really believe will help you navigate through these dark waters. I think it's important for us to realize that grief is not a dirty word. Now, I know when you're going through it, it just feels like heck, but it's not a bad thing. It's part of the healing process that we go through when we face loss or crisis of some kind. It's a very natural response when you suffer loss of someone that you love. And if this happens to you, recognize that it's a natural thing. In other words, don't try to stop it. I see people sometimes they go through something and they try to shut it down, but I want to say that it's important that you let grief run its course. Now don't let it go beyond that. Don't let it do more than that, because grief and sorrow can become addictive. I mean, I've seen people whose lives were completely destroyed and they couldn't seem to let go of some painful thing that happened to them. But that's not going to happen to you. I've got a few things that I really believe will be good instructions for you, and I want you just to listen to me as I kind of lay these out for you. I want you to understand that it's normal to have these feelings when you're hurting and it's painful and you're weeping and you're thinking, this is the most terrible time, this is the most terrible feeling in the world. I want to say that's very normal. And I think that your feelings are one of the most precious and wonderful parts of your life. The thing is you just don't want to be dominated and controlled by them. See, don't be afraid of grief. Don't shut it out. Don't shut it down. If you lose someone, don't shut their memory out of their life. As a matter of fact, I think you should share your thoughts, express your feelings about that individual. Remember the good times, and don't be afraid to laugh. Don't be afraid to cry, because that's something that God put within us to be able to process the healing. That's actually comes from the core values. That's the how can I say this? The result of actually having love for something that you lost. So keep that in mind. Most of all, I want to say, look to the Lord, because I promise you He's faithful. I know sometimes when you're going through this, you feel like everything is so dark and the Lord is quiet, but I'm telling you, He is so faithful. I want you to listen to what He promised that He would do. This is a scripture from Isaiah chapter 51 and verse 3. Listen to what He said. He said, "The Lord will surely comfort Zion and will look with compassion on all of her ruins. He will make her deserts like Eden and her wastelands like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found in her, thanksgiving and the sound of singing." You know what that's speaking of? That's speaking of the fact that God shows up in the midst of your tragedy and He brings restoration. He begins to lift you up and He heals the wounded heart. See, God's looking on our ruins with compassion, according to the scripture. And He's going to bring restoration to you if you'll just let Him do it. I know it's hard to see when you're hurting, but listen to me. Grief plays an important role in our lives. If there were no grief, it would be terrible. I mean, our whole value system would be different. If there were no grief, there wouldn't be any remorse. It would just be kind of the mechanics of change. Our relationships would become unattached and they'd become hard-hearted. Mercy and compassion would be altogether different if there were not grief. Our memories of the loss would simply be some clinical thing that we wouldn't have any feelings about. God made us with a capacity to grieve. That defines our values. Our love and our devotion compels us in that direction. That's the human part of us that is so precious and must not be lost. So I want to just say this is an important time for you. And if you've suffered loss, take time to grieve. Take time. Let it run its course. Let that season play out. But then, at the end of that, it's time to rise up and embrace the living. The grief should only be for a season, and then it's time to rise up and look to your future. You know, there's three phases to the restoration of a life, and I've taken them from the book of Nehemiah. A lot of you know the story of the book of Nehemiah. If you don't, it's a wonderful read. You should look at it. Nehemiah felt so compelled to return home to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls. And he had heard how they had been wasted and in ruins. And the walls in those days meant so much more than what we would think about today. The walls really was a source of identity. It was a source of protection. I mean, there was so many things attached to that. But the walls were completely in ruins. I mean, there was no boundaries, no protection. It was terrible. And so he came back. He got all of the resources that he needed, and he came back to rebuild the walls. And there was three things that happened that I want to share with you. First of all, he walked through the rubble of the city that was in ruins, and he wept. That's the grieving process. That should happen. When you walk through the rubble of whatever it is, the ruins of it, that's a time to cry. It's just a time. That's a grieving process. It's not a time to make plans or make decisions. Sometimes in our life, I'm telling you, we just need to cry. It's a precious cleansing. And so during that season, he just wept. He just looked at the walls of Jerusalem and then he wept. Well, that season was over. And his second trip, here's what happened. He evaluated the condition of the walls. He needed to see what could be kept or what ruins needed to be discarded. This was a time of kind of sorting things out. I mean, you're choosing what stays and what goes. And it's a decision time. You know, you've already left the grieving time. Now you're having to make some hard decisions. I do not like to see people making decisions during their grieving time. So that's what he did, is he walked in on that second trip, and he just evaluated the condition of the walls. And then the third trip he came, and he began to rebuild. He began to move forward. Now, I know some people, they get so devastated that their life stops. And guys, I'm telling you, that is so unhealthy. I've seen people who years would pass and they're still devastated over something that took place, and that is not healthy. I'm telling you, if you're going through that, you need to get a counselor. You need to get someone that you can trust, that you can sit down and help you work through this thing. Being devastated is not a good thing. Being devastated is a waste of time. It steals your time, your talent, your energy, and it stops the momentum of your life. You stop moving forward and you just begin to look behind you. I understand that everything is very painful when you're going through this process. But I want to say, let it work. Let the process be completed. And it won't be long if you will do this until that very thing that you've grieved over has become a treasured memory to your heart. I'm going to be praying for you because I know God has a plan for your life. I want to say thank you for joining me today. I've really enjoyed spending this time with you. If you need more information about what we've discussed today, you can contact me at jerryedmon.com, and I'll get you all of the resources that you need to help you move forward with success in life.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast about success in life. If you would like more information about this subject or other materials or resources offered by Jerry Edmon, please go to www.jerryedmon.com.